19 years into a 32-year sentence, I received a conditional pardon from the governor, which released me from prison. But it didn't change the fact that I'm a felon, it didn't take anything off my record, and it didn't restore my rights, neither my civil rights like to vote or serve on a jury, nor my firearm rights. So I'd been sentenced to twice the high point of the guidelines. The guidelines were originally even lower, but they were 10 to 16 years. The judge sentenced me to 32. So by serving 19 years, I already had served longer than the high point of the sentencing guidelines. The question was, should I have the right to vote? Well, in Virginia, where I was, as well as in Kentucky, if you're convicted of a felony, whether you go to prison or not, you are never again allowed to vote, hold office, serve on a jury, be a notary public, any of those things, unless the governor personally restores your civil rights. Now, I was really fortunate that because I went in front of a governor for my pardon, which he granted me clemency and released me from prison, he was also willing to grant restoration of my rights. Now, that's not always the case. And at least here in Virginia, if you want to get your gun rights back, it's a whole different thing on top of that. So you have to get your civil rights back, you have to be off probation, and then you can go back to the court where you were sentenced or the court where you live, for the county where you live, and you can petition for basically your gun rights back. Now, for really minor offenses, I have a buddy who did 8 years for possession of cocaine. That's insane. You would lock somebody up for possession of cocaine for 8 years, and when he got out, he went through the process, he got his gun rights back. In my case, I had violent charges. I had robbery, and I had a shooting. I had something directly involved a gun, so they'll probably never restore my rights. And it's a question of whether that's right or whether that's wrong. Now, as a practical concern, I understand saying, hey, somebody who's dangerous or somebody who poses a threat shouldn't be able to have a weapon. On the other hand, I would like to be fully included in society again. I don't even really care if I ever have a gun again. But the idea that I always have a mark against me, that I get out and I can't vote, or I can't serve on a jury, or I can't do any of these things, well, okay, fine. So I was able to get past that. I was able to get my civil rights restored. Now I can vote. This will be the first year that I've ever voted in my life because I got locked up before I could vote when I was younger. So I have that right. But again, I still have this thing on my record. I will forever be a felon. I will forever be defined by that. I will forever not be able to buy fireworks or use a nail gun that has an explosive charge or, go hunting with my cousin or my nephew. And I think it's just difficult to feel comfortable or feel fully included back without having those rights. But at the same time, I understand people's concern because the idea somebody has of a violent felon, well, first of all, isn't somebody like me. Let's be really honest. That's not what somebody expects. So they imagine, okay, if this person was a violent felon, they're probably going to do it again, and they're probably going to, pose a threat. Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. As a matter of fact, the majority of the people I saw in prison for violent crimes were far less likely to go back, to reoffend, than people with property offenses or drug offenses or sex offenses. So the idea that people are dangerous, whereas somebody could have just lost their mind in a temporary moment, been in a bad spot, whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying that's a situation for me. I'm fully accountable for what I did. But the idea of whether what I did, in 2002 defines me is another question. Is that who I am today? Is that the threat that I pose or the person that I am to the world? And should I just never be able to get that back? Because there are a lot of people I know who've never been convicted of a crime, but I feel like are incredibly unstable and probably shouldn't have a gun. So how does that work? Do we just arm everybody? Do we just, throw them out on the streets? But I think more importantly is the question, at least initially, of civil rights. So Virginia and Kentucky, permanently banned. I think that's insane. I think once you've served your time, once you've gotten out of prison, you should immediately have your rights restored. We had a bill in front of the General Assembly in Virginia to do that, to put it on the ballot, to let Virginians decide whether people should have their civil rights restored immediately upon release, and it was shot down by a small group and subcommittee that didn't want to see that happen. I think that's really unfortunate because I think that encouraging the democratic process is always a way to get people more invested in society. And as far as the gun rights thing, again, where do you draw the line? All right, this guy who got his second DUI, so he's a felon. He didn't go to prison, but he can still never own a gun again. He can't go hunting with his kid. He can't defend himself in his home or with his family. I don't know where that line is. Or even in some ways, I don't think white collar crimes are minor. I think a lot of times white collar crimes actually have a far bigger impact. Somebody steals $100 million, which bankrupts a bunch of old people, which means they can't pay their mortgage or they can't, leave any money to their kids. That's a much bigger impact to me than somebody who steals $50 from a liquor store or from a 7-Eleven. But what I think is we say, does that mean that person poses a threat with a gun? I don't know. And I think the whole dynamic around crime in America is that we say dangerous crime is violent crime, even though the impact of that guy stealing $50 from a liquor store, having no intent to hurt anybody, is far less than that guy who steals $100 million or even $100,000 or even bilks your grandma out of $1,000. Think about the impact of that versus the impact on that corporation that's really not affected by that $50 or $150. And I think that we need to look at what crime is, and I think we need to look at what the point of guns are. Do we see guns as a matter of self-protection? Do we see guns as an ultimate right? Do we see guns as a sporting thing for hunting or for... And I think it really comes down to each individual person. Like I said, for me, I don't feel the need. Like, I don't feel compelled to have a firearm, but I very much want to have that right back. I very much want to be seen in the eyes of society as a full citizen, not a second-class citizen, not somebody who for the rest of his life will be defined by what he did just after his 18th birthday. So I would like those rights back. And I think some people would feel the same way, and I think some people may abuse it. So I don't think there's an easy answer, but my point is just that there's a conversation to be had. And I think that conversation needs to begin with civil rights and whether we feel that it's genuinely okay to disenfranchise people forever or for 10 years or for 5 years or for whatever that is. And then once we see that, and once somebody is paying their taxes and contributing to their society or running a nonprofit or doing whatever they're doing, at what point do we consider them then eligible to get their gun rights back?